If your landing page is slow, if it's cluttered up with a bunch of junk, if the color scheme, if the wording does not match what people want to see, it means your bounce rates will be high, and Google monitors this in the back end.
He went from college dropout to running ads for some of the biggest e-com brands on the planet.
Before the agency, I actually used to run e-commerce brands myself in 2017 at the very end of my high school.
Today's guest is Shri, a Google and YouTube ads agency owner trusted by 8 and 9-figure brands around the world.
That's the ability that I have. I'm a brand owner along with an agency owner. So along with handling my own brands, creating my own strategies, I work with brands that collectively do $10 million a month in revenue.
In this episode, we unpack the exact criteria Shri uses, from search volume to product feed quality, to decide if a brand can actually win on Google.
Number one, keyword research and market research. Is there at least a minimum of 50,000 average monthly searches in total for all of your products combined?
Why Google Ads success isn't binary, and the real factors that determine whether your brand scales or burns cash.
If there's only 500 people searching for your products in a given month, there's no way you're going to scale to 1,000 people or 2,000 people, because it's virtually not possible.
How landing pages, product feeds, reviews, and merchant center health now matter more than the bidding itself.
Google transitioned completely from just focusing on bids, meaning 80 to 90% of your success would be based on bids, to now maybe about 40 to 50% only.
And the step-by-step research process that he goes through before spending a single dollar on ads.
We start with the product feed, the landing page experience, because with Google, product titles is like doing interest targeting on meta ads.
So if you want to understand how Google actually works in 2026 and how top e-com brands scale profitably on search and shopping, this is the episode for you. Shri, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jordan.
Can we get right into it? And I want to talk about what led you to launch Yoru and your agency.
It's actually a very interesting story, because starting a Google Ads agency, it was never at the top of my list from the get-go. In fact, I would even say this agency was more of an accident that just happened while I was traveling. So funny story, before the agency, I actually used to run e-commerce brands myself. I'm first an e-commerce brand owner. That's how I initially started in 2017 at the very end of my high school. But going into e-commerce gave me a lot of individual knowledge regarding meta platforms, the different types of Google Ads strategies, TikTok ads, because during that time, I was basically a jack of all trades. I was trying to do whatever I could to essentially make it with my e-commerce brand. But slowly, as there started to be more drop shippers, as I started my YouTube channel and more people started copying me, I started to realize that this avenue of growth, which what I was doing in that situation was drop shipping, it was not the most sustainable, nor did it lead me to the most amount of happiness. So while in that phase where I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, I still remember I was on a flight. It's about 30,000 feet in the sky. And as I was just looking out my window, all of a sudden, the thought of an agency came into my mind. Don't ask me how. It just kind of popped in my mind out of nowhere, just the word agency. So what I did at that exact moment, I bought airplane Wi-Fi and I started looking up agency, what that's about. And during that time, I came across one YouTuber who I used to follow from the start. His name's Sebastian Georgiou. A lot of the e-commerce entrepreneurs will probably know him because he's one of the OGs as well. But basically, during that time, he also had his own Google Ads agency. And he was talking about, I watched one of his videos where he was talking about how it's going for him, how this was a big transition, so on and so forth. And that's the exact moment I decided that because I was starting to be really good at Google Ads during that time, majority of my results were coming from Google as well. That's the exact time I decided, hey, I'm starting an agency. I'm going to go away from the e-commerce business world, at least in terms of my own brand. And that's eventually what got me started into the agency.
So it's divine intervention, maybe.
You could say that. It was just on the spot.
Out of interest, what made you go down the kind of Google route? You mentioned there, you've done Facebook ads, TikTok. Why choose Google for the agency?
Yeah, so the reason why I chose Google Ads was because I was already pretty good at Facebook ads. I was starting to become good at TikTok ads as well. But me personally, because I know myself, I know that I'm not the best at understanding what creatives work the best when it comes to these advertising platforms. And a lot of the times you need a very solid creative, like a video creative, image creative for things to work. And even then, in about a 2 to 3 weeks period, you'll probably need new creatives again. And it was this constant cycle of getting brand new creatives where many people can do it right. You can even outsource it, so on and so forth. But during that time, I really lacked the knowledge of knowing what the perfect creative each time would be for my products. And for me, at least, it seemed to be too much of a hassle. But when I compared that to Google, I realized that Google, it's not more of a creative game. Rather, it's more about the landing page game. It's more about the product feed, your product image, title, description, etc. game. And although it's not easier by any means, for me personally, with my skill set, I believe that was much more manageable because that's something I can do very, very easily. So that's kind of the main point I looked at and when I decided that I'm going to go all in on Google.
Okay. As an outsider, I sometimes think, Google ads for an ecom brand is binary. It either works or it doesn't. Is that true, or can Google ads work for any ecom brand?
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that because on the surface level, it can seem very binary, where it's either working for you or it's not working for you. But when you get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty details, what you start to understand is Google Ads works for those businesses which, number one, have enough search volume, meaning if there's only 500 people searching for your products in a given month, there's no way you're going to scale to 1,000 people or 2,000 people because it's virtually not possible. And in that sense, your business is not scalable with Google because there's only 500 people, and from that, only a handful will buy, which means Google will not work for you. On the other hand, if you have tons and tons of keywords for your product, you have a variety of different variations of products, different sub-collections, categories, etc., then it's much more doable and feasible for you to use Google Ads, and there's a higher chance and likelihood that Google will end up working for your business. So on the surface level, it starts off with search volume. Then as you go deeper, then it becomes how good is your product feed? Are you showing Google that you're a real business and not just some scammy drop shipper or some no shipper who's not going to be really taking care of their customers? Because Google, at this point of time in their own business, they care about the highest quality business. They care about the highest quality service that a business provides. So those two things, number one, search volume. Number two, the quality of business you are showing you are personally to Google, those determine whether Google works for you or not.
Okay. And what would you say to brands that are maybe trying to figure that out? How can they see if Google Ads will be a good fit for them?
Yeah, first thing I always do whenever I start working with a new brand under my agency, or even if I am to start a brand new brand, is number one, keyword research and market research. The Google Keyword Planner tool is your best friend when it comes to this. And you're trying to identify certain criteria for your products. Number one, is there at least a minimum of 50,000 average monthly searches in total for all of your products combined? So if you search up any given product, all of the keywords should add up to no less than 50,000. That's the first criteria you want to ensure is getting met, because if that's not getting met, nothing else matters. Once that's getting met, I like to individually go into each keyword on Google. I like to do research to understand, number one, how many competitors there are. Number two, what are these competitors not doing? Because I like to capitalize on what they're not doing. For instance, when it comes to product images on Google Shopping, those little square ads you see at the top, if you see majority of your competitors have, for example, plain white backgrounds, well, now I know that they're not investing in a better background or a better kind of approach for their product images. So very easily, I can Photoshop maybe somebody or a real background in the back of that image and make it stand out from the others, because my main goal with Google is to be opposite of my competitors. That's number two. I'm doing market research to understand their approaches. And then number three, I'm trying to kind of break down their landing pages, because one key thing which Google looks at for your products is your landing page experience. If your landing page is slow, if it's cluttered up with a bunch of junk, if the color scheme, if the wording does not match what your people want to see, well, obviously they're going to drop off very, very quickly, which means your bounce rates will be high. And Google monitors this in the back end. So you want to ensure all of these things are getting met first, that you can create a better landing page experience than your competitors, because all these three combined, when they come together, that's when Google starts showing your ads more in the front compared to your competitors for the same bids or lower bids in that matter. And that's very ideal, because now you're not really wasting your money unnecessarily.
Okay. Can we just touch on the keyword research point? And I guess my question here is, are we just looking for the exact term of the product, or are we looking at related terms and kind of maybe second order impacts of what people might be searching for?
Yeah, good question. You're trying to look for a variety of different things altogether. Number one, you're trying to look for the similar or exact match keywords. For instance, if you're selling a 3D printer, you try to see how many people search up for the actual keyword 3D printer. And then as you find that major keyword, then you try to kind of expand from it. So maybe brand new 3D printer or 3D printer for sale or black 3D printer. You're expanding from that main keyword into its different attributes. And then down the funnel, more and more down the funnel, you can go into things such as how to use 3D printer if you're running like a blog related ad to your 3D printers, or you can go more education based keywords. First example was the how to use 3D printer, but how does your specific brand's 3D printer work, so on and so forth. So it's first at the very top, trying to find the highest buying intent keywords. Then slowly, as you kind of go out of them, as you deplete them, so to speak, then you go further and further into more education-based or just more variety around the buying intent keywords. And you try to create a well-rounded approach. You don't want to just buy a 3D printer now in your title. You want it to be more like premium heavy-duty 3D printer for business use or for home use. You're trying to really expand the market.
Okay. But just to clarify, you kind of, when you're spending, you start with the most direct phrases first.
Exactly, right.
Okay. And then just coming back to something you touched on earlier, it was, basically, am I correct in saying that Google is taking into account the user experience and it's not just a straight, I pay more for this keyword, I win? There's also other variables there like the landing page experience, like the image used and things like that.
Absolutely. So initially, when Google, like 2017, 2018, it was all about bidding the highest. And because there were barely any competitors, you could get away very, very easily with having a very mediocre or low quality landing page experience, product feed experience, and everything in between. And you would still do fairly well in the Google marketplace just because you had a decent bid. Flash forward 2020, 2021, as more and more dropshippers, bad businesses started entering the market. What ended up happening is now Google really basically made its system stronger. And at this point, Google transitioned completely from just focusing on bids, meaning 80 to 90% of your success would be based on bids, to now maybe about 40 to 50% only. This was a very big change because now that means the rest of the 40% or 50% of your success would be determined based on how good your product feed was, whether you had the right quality of the images, the product title, and everything associated with that, including the Google Merchant Center, which is basically the foundation of your Google Ads success. So bidding is an important part of the overall funnel, but it's no longer one of the main ones. You could very easily get away with bidding much, much lower than your competitors if you have a very strong landing page experience, your product feed is strong, your Google Merchant Center programs, reviews, etc. are all in place.
And would you recommend brands kind of take care of that first before looking at running Google Ads?
Absolutely. The foundation is what your Google Ads scale is built on. It's not the other way around. Many brand owners, even those I speak with today, they think, hey, just come in here, just click a bunch of buttons and let's scale. That's how they view approach Google Ads. And this is not further away from the truth because all this leaves their brand in is a bunch of turmoil and a bunch of low profit days. Because what you want to understand is your foundation with Google is what determines to the level of scale your Google Ads account can reach, essentially. And the weaker your foundation, the weaker your scale. I like to always compare this to the example of a skyscraper being built. If your foundation is weak, 5, 10, 20 years from now, there's a very good chance the skyscraper will come tumbling down and the whole thing will fall down. Same thing with Google. Right now, you might avoid building a strong foundation, but in the next week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, you will notice that your results start to plateau very, very quickly. And you won't understand why, because the market demand is there. Google is bidding every day. Google is spending your budget, but it's just not scaling. And that's because your foundation cannot support that scale.
Interesting. Are there any other characteristics that you look for in a brand that you think is going to be a good fit for Google Ads?
Yeah, so number one was, of course, keyword search volume. Number two was, can we actually make our products be different from our competitors? Because the key with Google is to be the opposite of your competitors and to not blend in. Because the moment your brand blends in with your competitors is the moment your brand starts to lose. So what I'm trying to understand with these brands is, do you even have the ability to make your product stand out? Meaning maybe do some photography if needed. Meaning maybe we can do some photoshopping if needed for the product images, or maybe change around with the pricing. If your margins are too low, for example, it becomes very difficult to play around with the pricing. And if you're one of the highest priced competitors in the market for that product, well, in that situation, there's a very good chance things won't work out as you want them because we have no room to play around essentially with our pricing, with anything in between that helps Google's algorithm show your ads to a different pocket of the audience. But realistically, search volume, if that's there, if number two, you have the ability to change up your products as needed based on what the market wants and based on your real results, it's going to be very difficult not to make Google work for you in some way in that sense.
And I guess on the flip side then, are there certain characteristics about a brand that they'll come to you, maybe, you'll have an intro chat or do an audit and you'll just be like, this isn't going to work with Google Ads?
Right. So in that situation, usually when I think of that, it's because the market that company is targeting, because some of the agents, some of the brands we work with, they're not always just the United States. Some markets in different countries can be very, very small. And that's the first thing that I'm seeing, that they're targeting a market which is way too small in terms of overall size, and their scale is just going to be limited, not because search volume is not there, but because their market itself that they're targeting is very, very small. In that situation, there's a very good chance we personally cannot help them, or Google Ads just isn't the right fit for them. Second, if their entire approach is based around maybe meta ads or based around maybe TikTok ads, their landing pages, their product titles, everything is just based around that, and they don't have the ability to change that because right now meta ads or TikTok ads is about 80 to 90% of their traffic channel. Well, then in that situation, Google is not the best bet for them because they don't have the ability to play around and change their entire approach for that market. Because you see, Google is very, very different from these other marketing platforms, and you need to have a completely different approach for it as well. And if your brand does not have the ability to kind of be a little bit flexible in that situation, then it's going to be very difficult for me personally, or anybody really, to assist in that situation. So those are the main things I'm looking at.
Makes sense. Can you just talk now to the different platforms that are kind of available under the Google ecosystem that you guys can advertise on?
Yeah, main one that we almost scale 80 to 9% of the brands with is, of course, the shopping placements. You can do Google Shopping with Google standard shopping campaigns, Performance Max campaigns, even you can force it to be shopping only. Then there's the display network, demand gen network that you can do with Performance Max campaigns as well. That goes on display traffic, for example, blog pages, other types of Google owned and operated other partner brands and websites, for instance. Then there's also YouTube campaigns that you can do, so your ads go on YouTube directly. Search campaigns, so on Google, when you scroll down, you see all those big blocks of text. Those are search campaigns as well. And then demand gen, which again goes on things like blog pages, emails even, like Gmail. If you see on the right side of Gmail, there's like small based ads, those things even. So those are the main platforms and channels with Google.
Okay. I was a bit surprised that you said kind of 80 to 90% of your brand's results come from shopping.
Right.
Again, I know very little about Google Ads, but I was just assuming it will be kind of mainly search focused.
Right. Yeah, that's what most brand owners think as well. But shopping is number one because, number one, when you type in any given product on Google, those boxes that come up at the very top, those are shopping campaigns or shopping ads. And those are the first kind of point of entry for a user when it comes to that search. Right. So that's where their search begins for their product. And oftentimes most people, so it's hard to say, but most people are very lazy. They would rather just scroll through those shopping listings, try to find the perfect product rather than go down, do a bunch of research. So that's why usually shopping is number one.
Okay. And then can you just talk to or kind of explain when or why the other placements may be better suited, or when they come into play, I guess?
Right. Yeah. Shopping, although it's the number one placement, although that's what we aim at scaling first, it's not the only placement in the ecosystem of Google. And shopping, after a certain period of time, you can only rank so many of your products number one, number two, number three. After that, you reach sort of a market cap when it comes to shopping. And you will see this on your own results when things also start to plateau, when you're mostly doing shopping or performance mags that's focused on shopping placements. But for many of the brands, it's not going to happen very, very quickly, because shopping, a lot of times, if you have a lot of search volume, it's going to take a lot of ad spend per day, thousands and thousands of dollars per day before you can really cap it out. But the reason why it's always ideal to expand to other platforms and other search placements even is not because you are reaching a market cap with shopping. Rather, it's because you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. Shopping is just one avenue of revenue that Google provides to you. There can be days where your competitors are outdoing your brand. They're winning more auctions, causing your brand to lose more auctions. And if your eggs are all in one basket, you're just going after shopping only. Well, on that day, you'll pretty much end up with a very low revenue levels, or you might end up unprofitable, which if you want to kind of diversify your risk tolerance and not have too much risk on your own shoulders, what you need to do is have these multiple avenues of placements in place, in effect. So one day shopping, let's say, does bad, but then there's the search that's still doing okay and it's still pulling your brand up. That's number one reason why you should have other campaign types running. But also, you want these other campaign types working with each other, supplying your shopping placements data. Because what you want to understand is, although you're running these other campaign types and many may not be the most profitable in the world, they're still supplying a lot of valuable data very, very quickly to your accounts as a whole. And that account as a whole can use that data to then become smarter, to then work off of that data to make your shopping as a result smarter. So it's a whole ecosystem. I always call Google as an ecosystem because that's essentially what it is. It's all working together.
Are there any scenarios where you'd recommend, maybe starting with YouTube ads for a brand, or is it always that kind of playbook of, shopping first and then de-risk?
If you have winning video creatives already, by all means, start with YouTube ads first. But if you're not too sure what your perfect audience is on Google, if you don't have something already established, it's going to be very difficult to make YouTube a success from the get-go because number one, your ad accounts as a whole does not have enough data. And number two, you're not sure if your creatives are going to win on YouTube because the ones that win on Facebook and TikTok, they may not necessarily do as well on YouTube because the audience is different. Their approach with the platforms they're on is different. On Facebook, people are bored, they're scrolling through their newsfeed and your ad happens to just come across their newsfeed. Whereas on YouTube, somebody's actively viewing a video they wanted to see. And your ad is basically a distraction that's stopping them from viewing that video. So it's a lot more of kind of a negotiation you have to do with your customer when it comes to YouTube. And that's why getting that creative to hit on YouTube takes a much longer process. So normally we do like to stick with shopping first, unless of course their products aren't approved on Google Merchant Center, for example. In that situation, you can't do shopping at all. So in that case, we might start with YouTube, search, so on and so forth. But worst case scenario, we have to start with YouTube first. But otherwise, best and safest scenario is to go with shopping, get that placement at least secure to get some momentum there before expansion.
Okay. And at what point does Google Display Network come into effect? When would you start to focus on that as a placement?
Yeah, Google Display Network, it's sort of the last thing you should be focused on because the display network, it's not designed to give you the most profits. It's not designed to get you the most revenue scale. A display network, the main role of the display network is to get traffic for your brand. And this traffic is basically eyeballs on your brand for people to be aware that, hey, this brand, XYZ brand exists. That's pretty much the main role of the display network. Now, there are some instances where your display campaigns like demand gen can be very, very profitable, but those are, of course, the minority. Majority of the times, it's not going to be as profitable as you would like. And as a result, you want to attack the display network only after you have gained some momentum from YouTube, from Performance Max, from everything else before you go into display network and focus on traffic.
Okay. Can we just kind of tie all this together and talk through your onboarding process? So from, when you've signed a brand, you've done the keyword research, you've looked at the competitors. What's next for you and how do you kind of get things started and then start to scale a new brand that you work with?
Right. So first step is always foundation building. After all of that competitor research, I'm not just going to throw away all of the data we found out regarding that brand. What we try to do is we try to incorporate that data into step one, which is building a solid foundation. We start with the product feed, the landing page experience, because with Google, your product titles is like doing interest targeting on meta ads. And we want to ensure our product titles have two things. Number one, high perceived value. Words like premium, luxurious, heavy duty, portable, all these things add perceived value to your ad. Because through the screen, there's no other way to gauge the overall quality of your product. But the titles and what images and whatnot help with that. So product title, high perceived value, along with proper SEO keywords. Then step two, for that parts is your product images, ensuring it's the opposite of competitors. Then it's about the descriptions, adding the main keywords that you found through your research and sprinkling it across your descriptions, and the Google Merchant Center product feed. So all these things act as key points for the algorithm, because when the algorithm is crawling through your website trying to understand what you're selling, it goes over these words and they're like, oh, 3D printer. This brand mentioned that 3 times, so probably they're selling a 3D printer. That's how the algorithm knows. But once we are done with step 1, which is that solid foundation building step, then we move on to step 2, which is basically campaign strategizing. Now, with campaign strategizing, we like to look at what the brand has already done, but generally we like to approach it with something called the TPS strategy. TPS, which is something I developed myself, by the way. You won't really find more about it out besides my YouTube channel even, but this stands for testing, profitability, and scaling. At any given time, your products, they're either getting tested, they're either already profitable, or they're already scaling. The product cannot fall outside of these 3 realms of dimensions right here, right? So because of that, what we want to do is we want to apply a strategy and a strategic approach based around products that need to be tested. They have their own smart bidding based approach, like shopping campaigns with smart bidding just for products getting tested. But then there'll also be products which are already profitable or scaling. We don't want to confuse the algorithm and place both of these products inside the testing category of products, because then the algorithm cannot scale these properly. So we have a completely separate approach for scaling products and those that are profitable with its own smart bidding based strategy. So this allows us to have proper product segregation around the strategy side and makes it so that we don't mix up both of these types of products in general. But that eventually leads us to now getting data within the campaigns. And then we further dive into that data, looking into something called the insight section of your campaigns to understand all of the keywords you're ranking for, what landing pages or what competitors you are dealing with during that time where you can improve, etc. And then that begins the optimization process, which is step 3. Where now we use that data to make things better on a long-term basis, ongoing basis. Every 14 days, every 21 days, we're trying to make things better in the back end. We're scaling the campaigns by increasing budgets by 20 to 30% every 7 to 14 days. We're decreasing restrictions, so on and so forth. So it's like a 3-step process, but after step 3 is the ongoing, where it's you go back to step 1, then you do those things over, then step 2, step 3, over and over again.
Okay, very interesting. Couple of questions on that. I want to start with the kind of copy and design. How much are you kind of split testing what you do there?
Split testing is very important with Google, not just for search campaigns, by the way, but for shopping as well. And split testing, the way we do it is we like to duplicate our product pages when it comes to shopping, because we don't want to split test on the original product itself that's doing well. You can't necessarily do that with Google anyways. So we'd like to duplicate the product page, keep all of the factors the same besides the testing factor. So for instance, if we're just going to test the image and have a different image, then that's the only thing we will change on the duplicated product page. But that's kind of the main generic approach for split testing we're taking. We don't like to overcomplicate it. Of course, we're doing other things such as split testing bidding strategies for campaigns. We're still split testing even campaign tabs like standard shopping versus performance max for shopping placements. But we keep it very, very broad in that situation.
And are you split testing the ads themselves, so the copy in the ad, for example?
Right, exactly. So that's more for things like performance max, hence the asset section where you have actual written ad copies, images, etc. We're split testing those, but even then we're split testing one thing at a time, because it's very easy to overdo it with performance max campaign, for instance, because one thing you want to know is with the performance max campaign, you have the ability to add in images. You have the ability to add in headlines. You have the ability to add in descriptions and even audience signals. And most brands, what they do is they try to change 5 different things for each split test they do. That's not an accurate split test because you don't know what's working at that situation. So for instance, what we do when we're split testing with the copy for Performance Max, we like to split test based on audience signals, for example, first. And that's the only thing that will change. Everything else will stay the exact same. That's just for PMAX. For search campaigns, again, we're split testing either the headline or the description first, and then go building on from there, basically.
Okay, nice. In a hypothetical situation where, a brand comes to you, they've had traction, elsewhere on another channel, they've got maybe 20 products on their site. When you start your Google ads, are you looking at starting ads for all of those different products, or are you picking maybe the 1 or 2 that are the most performing on other channels, or how do you think through which products or SKUs to kind of focus on?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about Google Ads is you don't have to separate out your products and split your budgets for each individual product like you would with Meta ads. With Facebook, there's really no way besides spending hundreds of dollars a day on each individual product. With Google, one campaign alone, the testing, the TPS approach, the T portion, is designed to do just that. It doesn't matter if you have one product, 10, 100, 1,000. Your strategy is designed to test all of those products at a given time. And the beautiful thing about Google is because it's based around search volume, it has the ability to research the market to understand, number one, which products from all those that you're testing has higher search volume. And number two, what is the potential or expected CTRs that those products can achieve based on how your competitors for those products are doing. So Google actually compares your products to competitors. And let's say one model of your 3D printer previously has been very, very popular in the market because maybe one of your old competitors was advertising that before in the market. Google can look at that data and then it will say, okay, so this product, this variation has the ability to do better. Let's start spending more budget on this first before the others. But that doesn't mean the others get neglected. Now, of course, you need to ensure you're not overbearing the campaign with way too much. Like if you have a $10 a day budget with 1 million products in there, that's just not enough of a budget to test everything properly, to get everything tested. So that's something you have to be very careful with. But Google is designed to test all of your products properly. And that's where you as an advertiser, as an agency or a brand owner should go in and try to segregate out your products properly. So Google, you can force the Google Ads algorithm to spend your budgets on the appropriate products and expand it so all of your products are tested thoroughly.
Okay. Final question from me on this kind of portion of things. Would you say in terms of scaling that there's any other parts that we haven't talked about?
In terms of scaling, again, it's not just about the campaign strategies. It's not just about increasing budgets, bids, etc. It's more of a holistic approach. And I always talk with brand owners who are like, Google is stealing my impression share from Facebook ads or from TikTok ads. And, Facebook is responsible for the sale, but then Google's saying it's responsible for the sale. So like, what's going on there? Right. And I always say, you don't want to look at Google as a standalone placement or a standalone platform, even though it should be, because Google is always going to be influenced by what you do outside. For instance, I'm going to give you a very good example. I have a brand that we work with under my agency that's featured on Shark Tank as well as Fox News. So whenever they get featured on this type of news publication, whether they're on Fox News, Shark Tank, etc., we see an immediate rise in sales on Google, a very, very big difference, right? Now, you might say, hey, why is Google stealing that traffic when Shark Tank or Fox News is responsible for that increased traffic, right? But the thing is, if somebody is to see your ad outside, even on Facebook, forget about Shark Tank or Fox News, most brands will be on Facebook, TikTok, Shop, etc. They're going to go on Google to search for their product just to see the options out there. That's just a normal kind of human psychology. That's how they approach things. And that's where your ad should be the one showing up. That's where they should now say, oh, I saw this brand on TikTok, I saw this brand on Facebook, and they're also on Google, which means this is a solid brand. This is a real brand, not some fake business that I have to worry about doing a chargeback on, for instance. So that's why Google is sort of the center point of gravity, which attracts all of these other people from other placements. And you never want to kind of think of Google as it's stealing traffic, because in any other situation, it's not going to be ever 100% pure cold traffic. That's just not how the platform is designed to work. So think of scale as more of a holistic approach, because you have to scale everything along with Google at the same time. You can't just do Google and focus on Google only, because that's a very risky situation you put your business in.
I know on this point, I know a lot of people say, Google Ads is a scam. Branded search, for example, is just mopping up other traffic. What would you say to that kind of comment that some brand owners may make?
Yeah, I can definitely see where they're coming from when they say branded search is just fake traffic. It's your own brand. But what you want to understand is if your brand is not in the situation where it has enough data or enough keyword search volume or enough authority in the market to get 100% pure cold traffic, and this only happens, by the way, after you have spent thousands and thousands of dollars a day on Google. You can't expect that with $50 a day spent. But initially, you need to have a little bit of branded search insertion within your campaign strategy, because that branded search, those keywords that are getting sales, that's still supplying a lot of customer data to your ad accounts. On the accounts level, the algorithm is understanding that, hey, this is a customer that came through, even though it was through a branded keyword. Google understands on a fundamental level what kind of a person this is, what interests they have with Google, what other websites they go on, etc. And all these things Google tracks in the back end. So even though it was a branded sale, now Google's using all of that person's data, basically opening him up like a book and trying to use that data to now go into cold traffic campaigns and find more people like those. So it's indirectly benefiting your cold traffic campaigns. But to be on the safer side, you want only about 10 to 20% branded search traffic, meaning 10 to 20% of your budget should only go towards branded search. The rest should be going after cold traffic.
Okay. And slightly unrelated question maybe, but how important is SEO success for Google success?
SEO and Google ads actually go hand in hand. And you don't need perfect SEO organic traffic strategies for Google, because at the end of the day, organic SEO is a little bit different than Google Ads SEO. Google Ads SEO is very heavily buying intent, where organic traffic SEO could be more education based, going after certain contents or some keywords that are just talking about teaching about your product, so on and so forth. So that's the main difference between both. But the more Google Ads efforts you have, or the more SEO efforts you have, it affects the other one tremendously in a positive way. If you run Google Ads campaigns to a certain keyword, which you are also doing proper SEO techniques on, there's a very good chance that keyword organically is going to start ranking higher for your listings as well. And then if you're doing proper SEO techniques, well, now with your products and all of your landing pages will probably have the right keywords in there, which Google can then use to target the right audience as well. So it's hand in hand. They go together.
Okay. My kind of next question on this, and it may be similar to how long is a piece of string, but assuming, a brand does everything correctly, what kind of returns can they expect from their Google ad spend?
This is always a question I also get asked whenever I do calls with brand owners, and they're always trying to find some expected return. And I always say it depends on your account. Now, this is not a great answer. It's not going to make them very excited, but that's just the unfortunate thing with Google. We have some brands in the same exact niche running at a 3x or a 4x ROAS. Another brand in that same exact niche, very similar approach, running at an 8x and 9x ROAS. Right? So there's a lot of external factors that go into the overall profitability, how much you can scale, etc., such as how much authority your brand has, how long has it been active on the Google Ads platform, what pocket of the audience you're targeting, because even though it's the same audience, you might be targeting different pockets of the audience. Each pocket is different for each brand. So that's why I always say to improve your returns, focus on your foundations, focus on your fundamentals, and there's a very good chance you might go from a 2x, 3x ROAS to a 5x, 10x ROAS very, very quickly. And it's not uncommon for businesses to be operating at that return on ad spend. In fact, right now I have a business in the automotive industry. He's running at a 14x ROAS consistently and spends about $25,000 to $50,000 a month. So he's already very scalable, and he's at a 14x ROAS. So you can imagine the amount of scale he has. But that happened because he's been running Google Ads since 2023. We've been working on his foundation since 2023 and really ensuring that it's in the right steps and in kind of the right approach that his audience wants to see. So the profitability is there. You just have to become basically worthy. Your business has to be worthy in Google's eyes for that profitability.
Nice. On the flip side then, I imagine you kind of audit a lot of accounts and you speak to a lot of different brand owners. What do you see brand owners or perhaps other agencies doing wrong and therefore not being able to scale that far?
The number one biggest thing that I see going wrong with ad accounts is they're doing way too much within their ad account. They have 5, 10, 20, 50 different campaigns. Each campaign is doing a separate thing for the same exact product. And because the same products are in multiple campaigns, they're doing something called internal bidding, an internal competition, where they're competing against themselves in those auctions. And this just causes a lot of internal conflict, which is absolutely not necessary with Google. Brand owners think that the more stuff they have, the more bells and whistles and just interesting strategies they have gone on within their ad account is going to help them scale. This could not be further away from the truth, because reality is, and this is just based on my experience now, scaling to over $100 million with Google, simple works best. We have brands where the campaigns, literally 2 to 3 campaigns, and they're doing multi-6 figures a month. right? So it's not about the complexity of your campaign strategies or how many campaigns you have. Rather, is the quality of your campaigns. What's going on within them? Do you have the TPS approach, or do you just have random products and random campaigns? All these things really determine your scale with Google.
Okay.
And this is the first major thing that most brands do wrong. Second, of course, is that they're not focusing on their foundations, fundamentals, their conversion tracking's off, and they're just kind of disregarding it as a sort of like something they have to get to after they figure out the Google ad strategy and the campaign strategy, which is, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't work like that.
Okay. I want to shift gears slightly now and talk about kind of the landing page and that side of things. How often, out of interest, do you run traffic to, advertorials, listicles, and kind of non-product page or sales page type landers?
Yeah, so for businesses where, for instance, shopping is just not working out initially, or for whatever reason their ads are not converting as they would like, we've shifted gears towards advertorials, listicles, etc., more education-based content, especially in the skincare industry. This is one of the most competitive industries out there, and I wouldn't just say skincare. Any industry that's super, super competitive, it can benefit from listicles and advertorial typed ads and landing pages. But realistically, we want to use that as a second to last resort, not as the first resort, because of the nature of Google and how it works. Now, I'm not saying these listicles and this kind of approach cannot work. It does work, but it's a much more longer process. It takes a bit longer to hone in and actually get it to work. And you might be better off trying to get buying intent keywords and buying intent landing pages to work first during this process.
Okay. And if you do kind of go that listicle advertorial route, are you then having to change your strategy on the front end with the ad?
Absolutely. Your strategy then is not anymore buying intent. It's more education based. So that means you need to have more of education based content. It needs to be more about getting them through the door, getting them to click on the ad to then read more about that, whatever topic you're talking about. For instance, the best example I can give you is in the skincare industry. One of the listicle approaches and strategies we have is top 5 best skincare product in this niche or whatever it may be. Whatever, for example, we're trying to go after psoriasis as a medical condition for skin. So top 5 best skin remedies for psoriasis. And then the number 1 remedy is your own brand or your own product that you're selling. Then number 2, number 3, everything else. So that was a kind of a listicle approach that works in that industry. But it's, again, as you can see, a much more longer process. It's not, hey, buy my product like you would with shopping or search.
Okay. And on the flip side to that, how often are you using kind of like embedded checkout pages, ClickFunnels, Funnelish, something like that versus a Shopify?
Yeah, we normally don't like to, or we avoid using Funnelish, ClickFunnels, etc., because that does go against Google's policies, especially if you have a Shopify store linked to your Google Ads account. That's the main URL, and then you're now introducing different landing pages, because that's called circumventing and also misrepresentation, because you're not representing your landing page properly. It's ClickFunnels that's the landing page now versus your Shopify website. So that's going to lead to a bit of issues with the ad account itself, and you don't want your quality score, which is a score Google gives in the back end to your listings and whatnot, to be negatively impacted because of these issues. So we like to stay away from it. Of course, you can work around it. We have many brands where they use Funnelish, for example, to scale. It's definitely doable, but ideally you want to stick to your main landing page and website.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess final question on this kind of more technical side. Do you work with other PPC platforms beyond Google? And here Bing springs to mind. And when does that become kind of worthwhile for brands?
Absolutely. So we do Bing ads along with Google ads. The reason is Bing is basically a replica of Google, but on a smaller scale. And Google ads is always going to bring in about 70 to 80% of your revenue. Bing might bring in about 10 to 20%. And because of that, we like to focus on Google first, get a proper strategy in place first before we shift gears to Bing. Now, the reason why I recommend Bing is because although it's a much smaller platform than Google, you can't expect as many sales and whatnot. Bing has also less competitors of yours there active, which means even if you spend $10, $20, $50 a day, there's a very good chance you'll be much more profitable than you would be on Google. But because the low revenue scale, the low volume, I always recommend to use Bing as a second platform after you've figured out Google.
Is there ever a scenario where you recommend going Bing first?
Yeah, when Google Ads is just not a platform where it's going to be a blue ocean for your business. And again, going back to the skincare kind of approach or an industry, if you run a skincare brand, Google might be the worst platform you go on because there's just so much competition, hundreds and hundreds of competitors. You might as well go on Bing first, because Bing, although it's competitive, it's going to have much lesser numbers of competitors compared to Google. So in situations like those where you clearly know the competition is way too extreme, or if you know that you cannot stand out from your competitors for whatever reason, maybe you don't have the ability to take photos, you can't Photoshop, you don't know how to use Photoshop, or you're just too lazy and don't want to, whatever the case may be, Bing, as in that situation, is a pretty straight up platform that you can just get some momentum on.
Okay. And we've talked platform expansion. How do you think through international expansion?
Yeah, international expansion, first of all, that should only come to your mind after you have one country dominated and one country in place. I see so many brands where they barely are just starting to figure out one country like the US or UK, and now they're already expanding onto other countries with other campaign tabs. Well, the thing is, it's entirely possible to do with Google. It's not too difficult. You can have just multiple feeds within your Google Merchant Center account to go to and cater each country. But because you have very limited data within your ad accounts, again, it's going back to the fact that the Google Ads account and algorithm uses this data to also go after different pockets of the audience in different countries. Even though it's not the same keyword kind of data, it's still using the main interest of a person in one country to compare to the other. It's using all these dimensions in the back end. So if there's not enough data, then it doesn't make sense for you to expand to other countries yet, especially if you don't have one country already figured out. So you want to ensure that that's done first before you look into expanding to other countries.
Okay. That makes sense. I want to completely change the subject now and talk about content. I know this has been a big part of your kind of agency growth story. Can you just talk to your kind of background making content and, when you started, taking it more seriously, I guess, and getting lead flow from it?
Yeah, so I started content when I found my first success with my drop shipping store back in 2017. Again, I kind of feel very fortunate for that because I entered the market when there was barely anybody talking about e-commerce, let alone Google Ads. In fact, I would say I'm one of the first Google Ads YouTubers on Shopify, which entered the market, which allowed me to go into a blue ocean, basically. So open for me to enter and just dominate. But content was more of like a secondary thing I started with because I never intended during that time to start an agency. All I was doing during that time was just recording my own kind of thoughts, ideas, strategies, so that if I were to struggle in the future, I could just look back at that video and just kind of say like, oh, that worked for me then. I'm going to use that again now. But slowly, as more people started saying like, hey, man, this is amazing. I scaled my store to multi-six figures because of your free videos. And, I started getting a lot of feedback like that really got me kind of thinking that, hey, not only am I really able to make a dent in other people who I've never seen before, but I'm also able to kind of maybe potentially use this as another revenue source for myself too, So that's when I started doing a little bit more mentoring, consulting, just trying to spread my knowledge throughout my channel and, help people beyond that. But that eventually got to when I stopped doing my own brand and started focusing on the agency. I noticed people were wanting to work with me already without me advertising the agency at all. So that's when I understood that, hey, YouTube is perfect for content. It's going to lead to a lot of good lead flow because people who watch my video 10 minutes in, they're already sold on my strategies. Otherwise they wouldn't sit around and waste 10 minutes of their life looking through my entire video. So that made it much easier for me to get clients initially. And that's when I realized, hey, YouTube is one of my main sources. I've already been here since 2017. I have a lot of authority in this niche and I can build on top of that. So that's really where I focus most of my energy on.
Okay. In terms of process, what does that look like? And here I'm thinking like, what is that, from ideation to going live? What does your system look like?
You'll be surprised to find out that none of my videos are actually scripted. I speak on the spot with my videos. Now, of course, I have some, I'll know what topic I'm talking about. I'll have a general main frame of what I want to discuss, like a main topic, but otherwise I'm just scripting the video as thoughts come to me, as I'm looking at, what's in front of me and I'm speaking based on that. But everything after that, I have a video editor who takes care of everything else. My main job is to just film the video, provide real value, and then just post it with proper SEO techniques.
Okay, makes sense. So I know when we spoke before, you said that, content was driving, good lead flow for you guys. Can you just talk to how you figured out the type of content that resonates best with your audience and how you speak to your ICP in a way that engages them and ultimately gets them to kind of take action and want to work with you?
Yeah, good question. So actually, it's a very long process, that I had to go through to understand what my ICP wants. And you might think it's funny because I've been doing YouTube for so long, since 2017, that I should probably know my perfect ICP. Well, the thing is, the ICP that I was targeting and my viewers initially, they changed completely when I started the agency. Initially, when I was doing drop shipping myself, I was making drop shipping content. I was getting a lot of views per video. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 that were normal for me during that time. But that was because I was targeting more of the beginner category of dropshippers who were trying to learn the process, trying to understand how dropshipping works and get into it themselves. Flash forward, I opened my agency now. With my agency, I'm not targeting beginners anymore. I'm targeting brand owners that are already established. They're doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue. So what that meant was I had to change my entire audience on YouTube and my entire approach. And this was not an overnight thing because I had to go from making too much technical stuff, which my old audience wanted to see because they did everything themselves, to more strategic level stuff, which now my new audience was more interested in because these were big business owners. They didn't have time to do it themselves. They had teams who did it for them. Now it's to talk on a strategic level, which they understood. And this naturally caused my views to drop off. I get a lot of people asking me like, hey, why does your views drop off? Well, the thing is, my new audience, there's only so many people who do 100,000 a month in revenue. It's not as much as the dropshippers who do $0 a month. It's a much smaller audience, which means my views will, of course, take a hit. So it went from 2, 5, 10,000 to maybe 100, 500, 1,000 views only on a good day. But that was completely fine because my ICP had changed. And now I was only targeting the best business owners, which are limited in this world, who watch, content in that sense. But then that's kind of what strategic level change I made from technical content to more strategy and strategic top of the funnel level content. That was the biggest difference.
Can you just give an example of what you mean by kind of strategy level content?
Yeah. So for instance, when I was doing technical stuff, I would be making videos like how to create a Google Ads campaign, how to do bidding for your Google Ads campaign, how to create a perfect landing page. Strategy level is, for example, $500,000 per month case study of an e-commerce brand, or how we scale this e-commerce brand using a very simple Google Ads strategy. Very top of the level stuff where I'm talking about the strategy side of things versus, hey, click this button, do this thing.
So it's kind of high level summaries and show don't tell rather than deep in the weeds of we did X, Y, Z.
Exactly. Showing it as a business owner, how I would break down a successful business myself to understand myself as a business owner.
Okay. And then it is kind of now a saturated space, like you said. It's no longer a blue ocean. How do you ensure in 2025 that you kind of stand out from other people in the Google Ads space?
Personally, or with the brands? How can brands stand out?
No, with your content.
With my content. So right now, there's a lot of new people entering the market talking about Google, this and that. But most of these people who are, or gurus, so to speak, talking about Google, they're covering very, very basic strategies, very top funnel level strategies, which is not bad. But a lot of the things they say, they don't have enough data to back it up. That's kind of the main difference for me personally, because as a brand owner, because I still run my brand to this day, I have not gotten rid of it. I use it as a testing strategy and a testing approach where I can test all these unique Google Ads strategies. The TPS approach, I tested on my own brand first before I made it market wide. That's the ability that I have. I'm a brand owner along with an agency owner. So along with handling my own brands, creating my own strategies, I work with brands that collectively do $10 million a month in revenue from Google alone. So this kind of keeps me at the top of the platform, knowing exactly what's going on, exactly what's not going on. We have access to higher Google Ads reps, not the basic ones you get on the phone with, but the higher up ones, which we get access to beta things, like beta new additions to the platform and whatnot. So that also lets us test things first before the market even sees that. And I'm able to make videos on that based around those things. So just these two things alone let me hone in on my craft, be the best at what I do consistently, that too.
Okay, so it's kind of leaning into credibility.
Exactly, right. I have more authority in this space because I've been in this space for so long.
Okay. And on the flip side, if you were getting started today with the content, what would you do? How would you stand out?
If I were to get started again today, That's a tough question because the market has changed so much that there's no easy answer to it. But again, it would be first figuring out what my perfect demographic is, what my perfect ICP is. The mistake I made when I was first starting out, which I think a lot of people still make to this day, is just going with the shotgun approach, throwing a bunch of videos and a bunch of different topics up, hoping something sticks. And that's not really an ideal approach because that leaves the door open for way too many people to enter the market or your audience network. And this confuses the algorithm because YouTube also has an algorithm which determines who your perfect customer is. And if you confuse that, well, you're going to have much more trouble trying to find your perfect customer at the end. So figuring out who your perfect demographic is, perfect ICP is, then creating videos tailored around that, but having a mixture of videos. So I mentioned earlier, I focus more on strategy level, but every once in a while, I'll throw in a technical video in there too, or a very long course related video, like a complete Google Ads course, which is like 30 minutes or an hour or too long. The reason why I do that is because I want to keep my content fresh and not just apply it to just one type of the audience, because there might be a situation in the future where the other audience member may be somebody who was a Google Ads media buyer turns into a brand owner. And because he already knew about me because I made content that catered to him first, now he's going to trust me more down the line when he's a brand owner, right? So it really comes down to just the perfect demographic first, then the content based around that. And if you focus on those two things, if you make sure the way your video is shown and, the thumbnails, for example, title, again, same like Google, high perceived value. If your perceived value of your video is higher than your competitors, then it's going to be very easy to stand out.
Okay. And then final question on this kind of content piece. You're saying there sometimes you'll sprinkle in, some of the more technical stuff. Will you ever sprinkle in a more, top of funnel type video that's appealing again to that kind of wider, maybe more beginner ICP?
Right, absolutely. So again, it's a variety of different content. Sometimes it's catered to beginners, but strategy level. Sometimes it's catered to more advanced. Most of the time it's catered to more of the advanced people. But you need to keep a little bit of a balance. 80-20 rule is what I like to go with, because that makes it so you don't completely just shut off your views. Because if you have too low views, then Google or YouTube algorithm will also think you're just not an ideal YouTuber, and they will stop completely showing your videos.
Okay. Shri, that brings me to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone listening did too. What type of brands do you guys work with, and where can people find out more about you?
Anything that's legal, anything that's sellable with Google, we help with. We don't have one specific category or criteria of brands we go after because we have experience in so many different industries. But as long as you run a brand doing $50,000 per month or more in revenue, and you want to scale with Google Ads, we can help. You can find out more about it on my website, yorumarketing.com. That's YORU marketing.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's @dedicatedyoung to find out more about what I do, etc. Or you can just search my name up on Google, Shri Kanase, and you'll see my YouTube videos, which you can dive into.
Shri, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me, Jordan.